Want to plate like a chef? We're breaking down the essential purees every serious cook should master. Bold flavors, silky textures, and a lot easier than you think. These are the 4 purees every chef needs to learn.
Okay, so first puree, we're going to start with the humble celeriac. Celeriac is quite an underused ingredient, I would say anyway. It's one of those ones that's always like knocking around the supermarket, but no one really never knows what to do with it. But it does make a fantastic puree. So I'm just going to start by prepping it. The easiest way I find is to top and tail it. With a knife, just go around as if you were going to segment an orange or a grapefruit or something like that. Purees get a bit of a bad rep as being, you know, it's a bit wanky, it's a Michelin star technique, kind of every dish has a puree. But a puree is a way of adding that smoothness, silkiness to dishes, but different vegetables require different techniques to make purees out of them. I'm not saying this is the only way you can make a celeriac puree, but I'm saying it's a very good way. This puree was very similar to one we did at dinner by Heston. Slightly simplified version down, but again, the technique is very similar. So what we're going to do, the essence of this puree is about intensifying the flavour of the celeriac. We get a pan on sort of medium-low heat. Going to go in with a good amount of butter. Now everyone's going to say, oh, the only reason I say it's nice is because there's butter in, which is not a million miles away. And to make sure we can cook out as much water as possible, we're going to cut it really, really small. So we've got our celeriac into our pan. You can then turn up the heat a little bit, but we're not looking to add colour at this stage. We're just looking to soften it down completely. To give it a really good mix, make sure all the butter is covered in the celeriac. Like with any puree or most cooking sauces, braises, anything like that, it's really important that you add seasoning throughout the cooking process. If you add it just at the end, you get a salty flavour. Whereas if you add it gradually throughout at different cooking stages, you get something which is more well-rounded. So as you can start to hear, you can start to see the first bit of water coming out of the celeriac. You can almost hear it as well when it's cooking. You can see it sort of like bubbling away. Celeriac's starting to soften nicely. I'm now going to turn it down to pretty much my lowest setting. Lid goes on and we're going to stir it every 5 minutes or so. So for the celeriac puree, we are going to enhance the flavour by adding a spiced milk. And we're going to add to the pan some black peppercorn. That's going to add a little bit of background warmth. We're then going to go in with some coriander seeds, which is going to be mostly for the flavour. But you can always tell when your spices are roasted. You should be able to smell them first. Okay, spices out to cool down. Then I'm going to go in my milk. I'm going for about 20% cream to milk ratio. You can use 100% milk, you can use 100% cream. It's all about depending on what sort of puree you want. So different things are going to add different consistencies to your puree. If you go just milk, it's going to be a little bit sweeter. It's going to be looser, so you might have to add a little bit less of it. By adding cream, you add a bit of richness and you can add a more velvety finish and glossier shine to your puree. So I want a little bit of that, but I also want the more neutral flavour of the milk because there's a lot of flavours going on. Just going to warm it through, and that when we add the thyme and the spices back in, it's going to infuse into the milk. Milk's now warming through. Just going to add my spices in, and then we'll set this milk aside now, and that will infuse for about 45 minutes to an hour, basically the time it takes for my puree to cook. So as you can see, the celeriac is breaking down nicely now. Now this is where people would always tend to go wrong, is this puree actually looks very, very good at the moment. The celeriac is soft. I can eat that and it tastes delicious, but cooking the celeriac further and further and further, it only gets better. Absolutely got to cook it and cook it and cook it till it's completely broken down. Because if I blended this now, because of the water content in the celeriac, it will blend into a smooth puree. But I want to impact all that flavour, that infused milk into there. To do that, I need to make this celeriac as dry as possible. Right, so we're gonna have another look at our celeriac. So as you can see, the fat is just bubbling up the top there. Celeriac is super, super soft. And all you're left with is just the fat and then the cooked celeriac pulp. So the next stage now is to pass off our spiced milk. So that's been infusing for the same amount of time the celeriac has been cooking. Just going to pass it through a strainer. A little bit of our milk to our celeriac. Never add all of your liquid. Even if a recipe states it, always save back at least 50%, I would say. You can always add more liquid, but you can't, once this puree is too wet, you're knackered. And just continue to cook it for about another 5 to 10 minutes, just to sort of amalgamate all those flavors together. Beautiful, so our puree is now ready to blend. The moment of truth. I would say give or take all together, you're looking at about an hour for this celeriac puree. So at this stage now you've got the puree blending, you can then add the milk as much as you require and adjust the consistency as it's blending. If you put it all in at the start, you can end up with a really loose puree. I would always recommend splitting your blending into 2 parts. So I always blend it. Once you blend it halfway through, you then want to just adjust your seasoning. But that is pretty good. But the sweetness you get from the celeriac by slowly cooking out all that water is incredible. Highly recommend you try this recipe, it's so good. One of my favourite purees. We're going to serve our puree with some beautiful scallops. A little bit of bacon to go with our scallops. A sensible amount of butter, unlike my compadre, Will Murray. So you don't need all this special high-powered equipment to make these purees. You can just do it with standard blenders you can buy online. I'm going to pass this through my fine sieve. Well, this stage isn't essential, to be honest. If I was at home, I probably wouldn't bother either. If you make the puree right, it shouldn't have any lump. So different presentations can actually help with the puree as well. Everyone sees all these drags on MasterChef and all that sort of stuff, dots, and you can do it with clams. We're going to choose a drag because it's quite nice to hold a little bit of that beautiful cooking juice, and every time you eat the scallop, you're picking up a little bit of the puree as well. We've got some lovely scallops here. Not reinventing the wheel here. Just doing scallops with a little bit of bacon. It's all very, very, very accessible ingredient with a few little chefy techniques. Always forget how good Celeriac Puree is. Gently get the flavour of the spices running through the puree. So that every time you take a mouthful, you've got that buttery sort of lemony dressing, smoky bacon, fresh apple, and then you've got that lovely like sort of richness of the puree, but also the lightness of the spice. We're now on to our second puree. So we're going to do carrot puree. We're going to cook this with carrot juice, a little touch of oil to our pan, and some butter as well. Let that soften down nicely, and then we're going to go in with our carrots. Butter always goes in for a couple of reasons into purees. Obviously, it's not essential to add butter. In one of the purees coming up, we're going to make one which is completely dairy-free. But it does help a lot, and most puree recipes will have butter in because it adds that gloss, that luxurious gloss and shine to the purees on the finish especially. We're going to go in with the carrots. Again, we're going to soften it down, little to no colour. If it gets a touch on the outside, you know, it's not the end of the world. So we've got some really thinly sliced carrots, just the same as we did for our Celeriac Puree. Nice and fine, super thin. You could grate them, you could do them on a mandolin, as long as they're super thin so you can extract as much flavour from them as possible. It's all about tasting on the journey of a dish. You don't just cook a load of random shit and then just taste it at the end. You've got to build the flavour as you're going. Nice high heat to start. Get the pan going. Get the water, the first initial bit of water coming out of those carrots. Once you start to hear the sizzle of a fry and not the boil, then it's when you want to add your lid. So it's almost at that stage, you know, when you're sweating onions and you go, oh, when it's sweated till it's translucent. That's the sort of stage we're at now. The water's starting to boil off, and we're going to turn it down again. Sort of the lowest heat your pan will go. Pop a lid on. That's it. Turn the heat down. Lid goes on. Okay, so our carrots have now been cooking for about 15 minutes now. As you can see, they're starting to soften up nice now. Starting to break down nicely. A little touch of cumin and a little touch of coriander. Aroma and that tiny bit of like fragrance coming through. And a touch. We just have a little bit of garlic. So the spices have been cooking in there for about 5 minutes. Now I'm going to go in with some carrot juice. So I'm going to add the carrot juice gradually. You don't want to just add any more liquid than you need. You're just going to dilute the flavour. So I'm going to add it bit by bit and then just keep adding it as and when it needs it. That's been about 35 minutes now for the puree. Carrots are nice and soft. I want to keep this colour nice and sort of dark orange colour. So I'm not going to add any milk or cream, but you could easily add that now. So I'm going to turn my pan off, place it into our blender. Again, we're using the same blender for consistency. I would probably say the common mistake most people would make is not cooking your vegetables long enough, because you need the vegetable needs to be soft to get it smooth. That is rule number one. I'm going to add a splash of cider vinegar just for acidity, and then we've got more vinegar, more carrot juice, and more salt if we need it for blend it later on for the flavour. I'm going to add a knob of butter into the blender. That's going to, as I said, going to give it a beautiful shine and a nice gloss as went onto the finished product. Always start it on low. If you start it on high straight away, it's just going to blow straight out the side. So always, whenever you turn your blender on, start it on low, get it going, get it moving, and then just go higher in speed as you blend it. Cool. So that was about 1.5 minutes blending. Oh shit. So the reason for the vinegar in this one is, as you can imagine, the carrot is quite a sweet vegetable. So by reducing the water content, we're obviously intensifying that carrot flavour. But to balance the sweetness, that's why we're adding the vinegar. I've probably placed about 20 grams in there, if so. Again, it's more to taste. It's just using the vinegar as a seasoning. So we will provide some rough recipes in the description. But I think the main thing to take away from this video, or the main thing I'd like you to take away from this video, is that making puree is a bit more free-flowing. Different carrots will have different levels of sweetness, whether you buy a cheap supermarket carrot or a really expensive heritage sand-grown carrot from Normandy. So you can balance the flavors, and it's about learning and tasting along the way, so you can develop the flavors yourselves and add what you think it needs for your dish. Someone does need to come up with a design of better ways to get the bottom bits out of a blender. So passing this through, again, this one freezes really well, and it would make a great soup. Again, carrot and coriander soup. To go with our carrot puree, we've got this Hoffing Great Mama. So we're gonna give it a quick sear, and then we're gonna go into a really hot oven, 220 for about 10-15 minutes, and then we're gonna turn it down just to bring up the middle to a nice cuisson. So we've got our pork, just gonna take it off the bone. So with this presentation, we're gonna do a clam because it holds the heat. So instead of dragging it out and then potentially the puree can go nice, it can go a bit dry sometimes, depending on how you're plating it. With a clam, it retains its heat. So as you're eating it, you cut the meat, you go through the puree, you scoop a little bit up, and it all stays nice and warm. Then we've got a touch of little good quality olive oil. There we have it. Oh, delicious. You've got that beautiful salty pork, and then you've got the carrot puree, it's sweet. A little touch of vinegar on there. Got lots of flavors going on there. You've got the carrot, a little bit of spice, a little bit of acidity, and a nice natural way to enhance the carrot flavor. Okay, so for our next puree, we're gonna tackle something a little bit fresher, a little bit more vibrant, and this technique is about keeping the natural color of the courgette while infusing it and getting a nice bit of fragrance and aroma and flavor from the herbs, but it's going to be a much faster, quicker process. If we were to cook these vegetables for a long time like we did the other ones, you'd end up with a very stewed flavor, which wouldn't be good for this vegetable at all. So we're going to go with some olive oil into the pan, nice and peppery, good quality olive oil, and this is going to be instead of the butter. And this is also going to add that gloss and shine and richness and depth of flavor into the puree. So we're going to go in with some courgettes into the pan, turn up the heat. We're going to cook it nice and fast to retain the freshness, retain a lot of the nutrients in the vegetables, and retain some of the color. So high heat on this one, and while that's sweating off, we're going to keep it moving. So we're going to go in with some chives. We're not going to use a whole bunch, but we can use the ends of the chive. Not going to cut them really fine, but just going to break them down slightly. This is going to help add a little bit of color as well, and also that nice, as I said, that allium sort of flavor. And then we're also going to add about half a bunch of basil. So the stalks are okay in this. We're just going to remove some of the larger stalks. I think there's a common perception that purees are a very dated thing. Like, I personally hate on a menu when I see something that says aubergine puree or whatever, because they almost get used as like, oh look, I'm a really good chef. I'm making a puree. I'm using a puree. But when they're used for the right reason, which is to enhance a dish and to get a certain flavor profile into a dish, and I think they're fantastic. But there is a lot of really bad purees out there. The good restaurants, it's not the be-all and end-all of that dish. It's there as a component to tie a dish together. So then I'm going to go in with some fresh garlic, just finely sliced. Going for about 1.5 cloves here. I'm going with that. Again, a little bit of salt at the beginning as well. And as you can see now, the courgettes have started to cook down. There's going to be pretty much no liquid going into this. Because the flesh of the courgette is quite soft, it won't need much liquid, but what we're trying to do is make sure it's cooked and soft, and then we're going to blend. So I'm going to go in my herbs now. So it's about 5 to 8 minutes without the herbs, and then about another 5 with the herbs in. So it's only going to be cooking for about 10 to 15 minutes, give or take the size of the batch you're making. So that is about it now. We're about ready. Bring our blender pride of place, our trusted blender. Love this thing. Right, and then we're going to go into the blender with the courgette concoction. So that was only about, I think it was exactly about 13 minutes on the stove, that one. And this is obviously a bigger batch than you'd probably be making at home, but the principle still remains the same as all the other purees. You do need a certain amount of puree in the blender to get it smooth. That is definitely a common mistake that happens an awful lot as people are trying to blend, like, 2 portions of puree in a massive blender. It will never go smooth. So lid goes on. Gonna add a touch more olive oil just to help with a nice gloss at the end of it. Good bit of salt in there. And then another little blend. So for this puree, we've got a bowl with ice underneath and then another bowl on top. And we're going to pass the puree through the chinois over ice to chill it down and to help retain the color. Again, I'm just showing you all the tricks and all the tips that we might use in the restaurants to elevate these purees to their absolute maximum. So if we by not chilling it down and leaving it hotter for longer, also adding acid, all be factors of discoloration of the puree. So that's why we're looking to chill it down as quick as possible. It won't knacker the puree, it won't be unusable by any means. It will just lose that sort of vibrant green color and become more of like a duller sort of like greeny yellow sort of color. So with serving this puree, it doesn't need to be super hot. We would usually sort of cool this down like this, make it in big batches, and then we would almost just take it out of the fridge like an hour before we needed it, and then almost serve it sort of room temperature rather than super, super hot. So once your puree is sort of chilled down, you can then decant it, or not chill, but semi-warm for us in this instance. So here we have our beautiful rack of lamb. Okay, so I've seared off my lamb and I'm now just going to finish it in the oven. A different technique for this one, for plating. For this one, we're going to go with a nice sort of base of courgette puree. Show off that nice green color. And a little bit of olive oil to finish. Let's give it a go. Lamb is one of my favorite meats. You've got a nice sort of pepperiness from the basil and the olive oil. Nice sort of like, almost like a Provençal feel from the courgettes and that Mediterranean, nice and light, nice and fresh. And that beautiful roasted lamb fat. Doesn't get much better than that, my friends. The next puree is my absolute all-time favorite. One that's been on the menu at Fallow for years. Slightly different technique, but absolutely jam-packed full of flavor. This puree is all about transforming the humble cauliflower into a culinary marvel. So we're going to start off with 750 grams of butter. Only joking. A couple of knobs of butter in here. And then we've got some finely sliced cauliflower. There's about 2 heads here. Probably won't need all of this. So often it's just cauliflower that's boiled and then blended with a bit of butter and cream. But this technique is one that really elevates it. So the basis of the puree is all about roasted cauliflower. So we're going to take it super, super far. So it's similar to how we did the celeriac. However, this time we are actually going to try and welcome color. Welcome it with open arms, I may say. So it's a labor of love, but it will be so worth it in the end once you see the end result. As always, fraction of salt at the beginning just to get it going, developing the flavor. And then we're going to start it on a high heat, and we're going to have to monitor it a bit closer than the other ones. And we're going to keep it moving, keep it roasting, keep it caramelizing until we've got a really good caramelization, making sure we're scraping the bottom to release that fond. What I was trying to do with these 4 different purees is show you different techniques to extract different types of flavors from all of the vegetables, and different techniques to the puree. You could do a roasted aubergine puree. You could just do a plain aubergine puree. You can do a smoked aubergine puree. There's lots of different methods. You could do a plain white cauliflower puree, where we just sweat it really low with a lid, and then as soon as it's tender, blend it with milk, and you have a beautiful, delicious, clean, clear cauliflower puree. Whereas with this one, we're trying to add that roasted cauliflower flavor. So you really want to push it. You can start to see it's starting to caramelize now. We want to get this all over the cauliflower. So you have to keep balancing the heat, releasing that from the bottom of the pan, like so. So my cauliflower's been cooking down now for about 30 minutes. So as you can see, it's lovely and caramelized, really, really soft. You might think it's too much, it's going to be mushy, but the cauliflower can stand up to it. At this stage now I'm going to add a touch of milk, just to loosen it up a little bit. And I'm going to add a splash of cream, not too much. Once the milk is sort of boiled together with the cauliflower, we can take it off the heat, bring in our blender, and same as all the others, we're just going to blend away. So we're going to slowly start to blend this one. And I have 2 very special secret ingredients. Parmesan cheese, Cabernet Sauvignon vinegar. These are the 2 things that are really going to make this puree stand out. So I'm going to remove the rind of the cheese, and we're just going to add a couple of chunks of cheese into the puree. Now this is going to help thicken the puree, help to emulsify it slightly, and it's also going to give that beautiful natural umami flavor to the puree, almost using the cheese as a seasoning. Same with the vinegar, it's going to add a lovely bit of sweetness, and it's going to help to cut through the richness of the butter, cream, and the cheese. So it is an intense puree, this one, but bear with me, stay with me. So we're just going to taste the puree as always, halfway through, and then you can adjust the seasonings, because it's all about your personal palate. I can tell you what to put in it, but it's all about tasting it and understanding it and making sure that you can make the decision the next time. So we're going to touch more milk because it's still a little bit thick, a little bit more cheese, a little bit of everything basically. And we're going to start blending again. We've got this beautiful sort of like light brown color from the roasting on the cauliflower. And then we're just going to pass it through our strainer. So it's lovely and smooth. That was about 2.5 minutes blending on this one. For this one, we're going to go into a bottle. Just gives you a little bit more accuracy when you're plating. We're going to cook off our chicken crown to go with our puree. Going to get it seared off on both sides before finishing it in the oven. Chicken is done. We're going to remove the chicken from the oven to go with our puree. So the bottle is nice, just gives you a bit more. You can just play around with the presentation a little bit. Make it look sexy, make it look pretty. Got a little bit of cauliflower for garnish. So this is just a nice little garnish. This would go perfectly, obviously, with a nice little chicken sauce on the side here. You know, some lovely buttered greens would be nice on this. And there it is, my absolute favorite puree. I just love how you get that like really nice roasted color, but also the lovely gloss. And it goes really well with loads of stuff. You know, it can actually go really nice with a piece of fish. I think you'll be surprised what you can achieve when you just apply a few basic techniques to puree making. Very rich, very unique, full of umami flavors. Delicious.